Good evening. Welcome to the class tonight. We are going to finish Exodus. This is going to be an amazing night. We're going to go through Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers in survey fashion, but we'll probably come back and visit some of Numbers again next week as we go into Deuteronomy because they're sort of connected. And we'll be done the book of Moses by We'll be done the books of Moses by next week, by next class, the end of next class, pretty sure. And then you'll fly into the history and then on our way. So this is class number 4. And tonight we're talking about the foundation of the law. We're going through Exodus into Leviticus and Numbers. This is where Israel begins to get the instruction that God wants to put in place. This is the structure that God is trying to give a nation. Now, it's like there was a structure that they had, an imposed structure on their lives in Egypt as slaves. You know, that structure was enforced upon them by the pagan rulers that were keeping them. And so there was a lot of, Israel had come out of Egypt, they had been brought out of Egypt, but now what God has to do is get Egypt out of the people of Israel. I mean, they had lived in this culture, lived in this frame of reference for a long time. 430 years, it's all that they knew. And the demonstration of God's power were very effective, but there is a boredom. It's kind of hard for us to imagine, but there is a boredom in the presence, in experiencing the presence of God and experiencing the demonstrations of power of God. We see this throughout the Scriptures. And we have seen it, if you go and study church history, you see it in the study of church history, that there is a remarkable, almost tragic kind of boredom that comes into the people of God at certain points, and familiarity happens. And so God is going to start to put in the infrastructure for their spiritual lives. And because they have been slaves for so long, the idea of just writing things down and putting things on paper is not such God understands man. God understands that he's made of dust. God understands that he cleaves to the dust. So God is going to give Israel a way of worshiping him, a pattern of worshiping him, some very detailed instructions on what to do, what to eat, how to live, these kinds of things. And why did this group of people need this? And there is a proverb that says, when there is a multitude of transgressions, the princes are multiplied. And so you have this group of people, you have a mixed multitude. Some of these people that came from Egypt, out of Egypt, were not Israelites. They were Egyptians that saw the power of God. So it was a mixed multitude. And God is going to define things. He's going to put things down on paper so they know the details. You need to know the details. So there's 2 foundations. These are two Hebrew words, musar, teaching or discipline, and derek, or derek, the way of the path. That's for you, Mr. Schultz. The musar. And the 3 premises of the law to remember are these ones. It can be applied to all peoples, and it can be applied to all peoples. The commands are consistent, and the commands of God are prescriptive. They make claims upon our behavior, and God expects a response. So one of the first of the 4 divine institutions that God gave to human beings was the divine institution of free volition. Man is created in the image of God, and God can do as he pleases, and God created man to do as he pleases. So that should end a lot of debate about, what does the Scripture say about man's capacity to respond and choose. And there's debates about how that response happens, and that's a debate that will never be satisfied here. So we have to be very careful and very good stewards of even our intellectual curiosities. We can get into a lot of arguments about, how and when a man makes a choice. These kinds of things are things that God tells us are true and doesn't necessarily give us any kind of satisfactory human answer that lines up to reason and human logic. And that is just part of our faith adventure. And God asks us to believe Him by faith and asks us to believe that you must respond, that all may come, that whosoever will may come, that if they call upon the name of the Lord, you shall be saved. But there's also this whole other principle that the Holy Spirit does the effectual work of drawing and convicting and prompting a person to respond. And so we do not know where that line ends or where it begins or if it is there. We just know that Jesus told us to go and make disciples. So we go and make disciples. And so, but the laws of God can be applied to all people. Romans 3:1 says, Romans 3:1, what advantage has the Jew, or what profit of circumcision? What advantage has the Jew? The Jew has this advantage in that he has received the oracles of God. He has received these commandments of God for a specific purpose, that the Egyptian character that may have got into his spirit, into his soul, into his practices would be worked out of him. And so the commands are consistent. There is a command of God. They require a response. And we'll see how this works. There's an idea of wholeness that God is trying to bring into His people. Holiness, and that's a separation from the world and a commitment to. Yes? Well, the Egyptian practices, the Egyptian culture, all of the things that Israel had been exposed to for 430 years was in them, or about them. Living as a slave is a very, in one way, a comfortable kind of existence. In one way, it's a comfortable kind of existence for them. I'm not talking about the slavery that we know of here in the United States. This is, whatever, those kind of things. But there's a comfortable kind of existence in one way. There's no freedom. There's no decision. You eat when you're told to eat. You do this. And the Egyptian and the Israelites did not have to work for their food. They did not have to wait for their food. They did not have to have a relationship with God at all. They just were told what to do. If they didn't do it, they were beaten. It was pretty much in that sense, not comfortable in the sense of ease, but in the sense of, not having to make decisions. Liberty brings responsibility. Once you are free, then there's choices to be made. Did you ever see the movie, what is that movie? Tom Hanks got stuck on an island, cast away, and he has no decisions at all except surviving every day. And then when he gets back to the United States, it's like there's a flood of decisions, and the movie ends with him in a crossroads. Which way am I going to go? A beautiful girl just went that way, and a road is going that way, a road is going that way, and a road is going that way. Before he had no choices at all, and now it's like, what do I do? I'm living, on the island. It was survival every day. For Israel, every day was just a survival kind of thing. But that was, that's sort of a, like I say, what is it? The structure and the structure and the force that they had to live under made it unnecessary for them to live in any kind of real relationship and any kind of real responsibility or decision. So the Ten Commandments, we talked about this a little bit last time, but this is the beginning of how God starts. Now, the Ten Commandments can be divided into two ways: duties to God or responses to God, and then relationships to people. And so first, the relationship to God is, God is saying, look, there are many gods that you've seen, but there are no gods but me. You saw what I did to Israel. Now, we saw what I did to Egypt's gods. Now, that was really God's program for the plagues. The programs for the plagues were not only to destroy and bring Israel out, but they were also to show Egypt and other cultures just the vanity of worshiping these idols. If you please the idol will satisfy your desire. You have to satisfy its desire before it can satisfy your desire. And this economy is different. God is like speaking. The 10 Commandments are given. They are given in grace. They are given in grace because God calls the people out first without them doing anything. They cried out to the Lord. They said they groaned the groaning of what they were suffering in Egypt under the hard bondage that they were living under. The groaning was heard in heaven, and they were brought out. So the commandments are not given to make the people acceptable to God's deliverance. The commandments are given after the deliverance. After the deliverance, you get the rule of behavior. And this is true of the Christian life. After we have been delivered, God does something in us to give us a testimony. James tells us this: faith without works is dead. If your faith is alive, then the action of your life will bear witness to the life that's in you. All right? And so the commandments were not given to make Israel an acceptable nation to God. God already chose them. God already chose Abraham. And that was the whole point of Genesis. Look, it's not that you got this point because you're so many people and I just like all the work that you did on the pyramids. I'm just so happy that you lived in bondage so long with such patience that I'm bringing you out. That wasn't it at all. God just said, I'm going to demonstrate my power to the world system as it's represented by the nation of Egypt, and I'm going to bring you out, and I'm going to make you a people. And once they're out of this, once they're through the Red Sea, once they're enemies, see, this is the place they're at. The enemies have been swallowed in the sea. There are no enemies that they know about. They've just seen God wreak havoc on all that Egypt stood for, and He brought them out with like abundance of riches. They're carrying gold, silver, precious stones. Some people just had to drag their booty out of the city. I mean, not, the booty in the sense of that's a word that means something a whole lot different now. But, drag their treasure. Booty is pirate's treasure. And they have these big bags of everything. They're dragging everything. They're actually dragging both out into the wilderness. But they're carrying lots of gold and silver. And there's that gold and silver and precious stone and all of the fabric that they have that comes with them. Rich fabric, precious things, purple, blue cloth. It's like it was not like they had to dye it with animal dye and to make purple you had to catch enough squid to get purple dye to create purple clothing. That's what Lydia was. Lydia was a squid fisherwoman, and a maker of purple, and that's how you made purple. That's why Paul found her down by the water. She was down there worshiping as a Jew, but also catching squid, take the purple, kind of interesting. That's the kind of lady that God called into His purpose there, isn't it? Anyway, so duties to God first, okay? So we have the supremacy of God. This is the internal worship. Like, what is your heart set on? Is your heart set on me? This is the first issue for the Lord. I've brought you out. You've seen who I am. You've seen my mighty hand. And now I'm just telling you, don't think about all those gods that were destroyed. Don't think about the gods you're going to see in the future, because you're going to go into this place and you're going to see other gods. I'm over them all. Internally, your heart has to be set on me. Have no gods before me. This is the first thing. This is the first thing He's trying to, look, you saw what I did. Now it's about relationship. I've done some things for you. I've shown you how much I cared. I've buried all your enemies in the bottom of the sea. I did that. You saw all that. You see what I control. And now I'm telling you, and now that you've seen this, now I'm asking you to worship me and me alone. And so that's the internal worship. And the second part of it is no idolatry. Don't try and figure out what I look like. Don't try and figure it out. Don't try and make some image of me. This is the external worship. Your heart picture is the picture that's going to drive you, or not drive, that's not the right word, is going to lead you. The heart picture is what leads you. Don't try to make, the Egyptians tried to make things and they had no idea what they were making. You saw some of the pictures last week, right? The gods with strange heads and human bodies and everything like that. Dagon, the god of the Philistines, had a fish body and a man head. And so, all these kinds of strange, perverted kind of vain imaginations that came into people. God has said, don't, take that out of your mind too. Stop trying to figure out what I look like. Just relate to me. I am spirit. I am spirit. You're not going to be able to see me. Jesus Christ will come and you will see and touch him, but you're not going to see me. And then the third thing is the verbal worship. How do you talk about me? Like, don't be profane about it. When you talk about me, don't use my name in vain. All right? The sacredness of God. Like, be careful about the way you talk about me and my character. It's like, don't be frivolous with the things that you say about me. So the verbal, the idea of right worship, the idea of outward. So the inner heart, the externals, not such a big deal. The verbal, yes. And then the last part is like how you use your time. Like, how do you manage your worship of me? That's the service of God. That's the keep the Sabbath holy. So the first one is have no gods before me. Second one is make no graven image. The third is do not take the Lord's name in vain. And the third part of it is keep holy, remember to keep holy the Sabbath. Like your work is to decide to enter into my rest. This is the point that's made in Hebrews 4:6 to 11. It says here, where is it? Let us give diligence at the end of this. I think this is 4:11. Let us give diligence, or let us labor to enter into that rest, so that no man fall after the same example of disobedience. So that the true Sabbath, like what is the true Sabbath? The true Sabbath rest is always today. It's like, and this is our labor, this is our work. Our work is to purpose or decide that we can't work. That makes sense? Can you follow that with me? You following that with me? No? Okay. Here it is. When it says in Hebrews 4, when it says, let us labor to enter into his rest, it's not talking that we have to work, and then find a place of rest. It's talking about, here's your labor. Here's the one thing that you can do. Jesus said it Jesus said it when he was asked in John 6, how do we work the works of God? Jesus said, believe on him whom he has sent. That is the work of God. Jesus said that. So our labor, our diligence is to not try to figure out how we can get to this level of acceptance to God, but to receive. Remember the Sabbath. You are at rest. You're not slaves anymore. Let's bring it to the context of Israel. You're not slaves anymore. In slavery, you had the tally. You fulfill the tally. If you didn't fulfill the tally, you got beaten. And that was the way that you made yourself acceptable to the overlords that were in Egypt, to your managers in Egypt. It's not this way now. I am not that way. You have a relationship with me. There's a presence. He's going to give the Israelites a demonstration of his presence and a way to worship him. And he's saying, today is the day of rest. And labor, be diligent to enter, to believe. Be diligent to believe and enter into the rest. It's almost like God is saying, the work that you do is just to sit down and think of me and to receive from me. Don't try to impress me. It's not going to work. So, all right? So that's the first part of it. So that's the first part of that. Now the next commandments are all related to our relationships to each other. All right? Our relationships to each other. So, God is revealing himself as the I am, as being present all the time. So this is the first idea. Once you get this concept, if you're working on these first concepts, these other concepts are not going to be such an issue. But there is society, and remember the laws here, the rules of God, the commands of God are applicable to all society. Now, supremacy of man, or respecting, honor your father and your mother. Now, this is the sacredness of our origin. Where did we come from? There's a sacredness about that. Like, where did you come from? You have a father, you have a mother. Satan became alienated. He denies, like he sort of pretends and portrays himself as sort of equal to God. Like, I am the dark side of the force, and there is a good side of the force. That's the doctrine of Star Wars. And that's a yin and yang thing. That's another kind of thing. It's not there, really. God created Lucifer. Lucifer became alienated from his origin. He denied where he came from and tries to present himself as somewhat equal to the Father, equal to the Son, equal to the Spirit. He's not. And so what's a very visible representation of your origin, your father and your mother? Honor them. You wouldn't be here without them. And if you want your life to be long on the earth, you honor them. Obedience stops at a certain point when you become responsible for yourself, but honor goes forever. And what if you got a dishonorable person? That's your parent. That's something that you have to deal with the Lord. Like, my father is dishonorable. He did this and he did that, or he hasn't been in my life at all. That's something that you have to, God is just saying, honor your father and your mother. You're here. You're here. The next thing is against the sacredness of the person. Thou shalt not murder. There's a sacredness of the person. And God talked about this early on when Cain killed Abel. The sacredness of the person. Each person is valuable. Each person is on the mind of God. Each person is fearfully and wonderfully made. And so this is that part of it, the similitude of man to God. I made each person, I breathed into each person. Every person has something of me in him. When you violate that by taking his life, there's a sacredness that you have violated. You have profaned my plan and my purpose. All right? And then the third one is this one, the sacredness of intimacy. Okay? The sacredness of his intimacy, like against adultery. When a man and a woman become husband and wife, the two are made one flesh. Jesus affirmed this. This is not like, there's a lot of talk about like Jesus doesn't really think of marriage this way. Marriage can be this way. You don't find anything Jesus talking about. Oh, really? I ask you to go to the book of Mark and figure it out, and the Gospel of Matthew, and you figure out what Jesus said about one man. From the beginning, it was one man and one woman, and when they come together, they are one flesh. What God put together, no man break asunder. He said that's the way it is. So God said against adultery, and really Jesus really defined it. If you want to look at laws on divorce and remarriage and everything, Jesus reaffirmed everything that, if you get, the hardness of your hearts is going to cause divorce. And what I'm telling you is like, once you violate this and, you enter into adultery. And Jesus said this, now there's grace and there's all of that. There's lots of stuff to talk about and to cover that heal that kind of thing that may have happened in your life or someone in your life that had that happen. But Jesus was compassionate, but he was also convicting with what he said. He wasn't asking people to be less than they could be. He was trying to give them the power to be all that they could be. So Jesus said some things that when you listen, like, some of the things are very symbolic, like eat my flesh and drink my blood, and people are saying, that's like crazy. What are you talking about? And I can't understand all of this. And then there are other things that were just hard and fast kind of things. He said, look, if you've got divorced and you get married to somebody else, you're an adulterer, she's an adulterer. That's the way it is. That's just the way it is. And Jesus didn't qualify it. He didn't say my blood covers it or anything. He said, the reason you have divorce is because your hearts are hard. And, Jesus is saying, okay, you can come to me, you can get right, all of this can happen. I'm sure there were adulterers and everything, divorcees, all in his company. So he wasn't just speaking, he wasn't concerned about people staying with him. But that's what he said. It's the sacredness of intimacy. And we'll see why that's so important in God's economy in a few minutes. All right, and the rest of this is really dealing with your things, your stuff, your property, your words, your lies, that kind of thing, your testimony, and then, wanting things. Like stealing stuff, grabbing stuff, that's one level. That's one level. The next level is like if you're trying to get an advantage on someone, you lie about them, that's another level. And the last thing is, even if you don't steal, if you want to steal something from somebody, there's something in your heart. And this is like really the first kind of indication of what God is talking about. Jesus is going to really, when he gets to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, he's really going to start talking about what comes out of you is really the problem, not what you do on the outside. And covetousness is an internal thing. We're back to the internal. You can rob a man of his property, his bicycle, his donkey, all of these things. And you can lie about a person. But the real issue, there's like a level here. The real issue is your coveting. That's if you want to get rid of these things, if you want to stop stealing, you won't steal if you're not coveting. You won't lie if you're not coveting. You lie because you covet a reputation and you want that person's reputation. So this is really the first evidence, and Jesus will make this the whole thing. Jesus will make this the whole thing when he gets to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. He'll say, what's going on in your heart is the real issue. If your heart is not set on God, if that's not happening, if your heart is not set on God and you don't have that internal worship going on to one God, then this is possible. Coveting is possible. You're not satisfied with who you are. You're not satisfied with what you have. And if someone is better than you, you're not satisfied with telling the truth about them. You'd rather say something nasty about them. So coveting is like, it might be the 10th commandment, but it's at the other end. It's sort of like, okay, if you don't have this part of your heart right, this is where your heart is going to be. You're going to be wanting. And Jesus in the Gospel of Mark will say that is going to be one of the essences of the eternal torment, is the want, the lust, the desire that can't be fulfilled in hell. You are wanting this, you are desiring this, but you're never getting this. And the worm dies not, the worm dies not, the worm dies not. Jesus says this statement in the Gospel of Mark. And he's defining what torment is going to be like for people who give themselves over to covetousness and selfishness. Okay? So Jesus, these things were engraved on a stone. Moses brings them down from the mountain. And these were like, if you follow these 10, pretty much everything is going to be okay for you. So we went through this last week, the progressions, right? Remember this from the very end last week? I'm just bringing it back. It was like at the tail end of the class last week. But Moses really, over the course of the next couple books, is going to make 609 injunctions to Israel. This is from the Talmud. This is like a little commentary on the Talmud and how God goes through all the different places and how things change as time goes on. In, let's see, we're Psalm 15. I didn't read it. Psalm 15, David says, who may abide in your tabernacle, and who may dwell on your holy hill? And here's the 11 that David has in Psalm 15. It says, you walk uprightly, work righteousness, you speak the truth in your heart. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. He swears to his own hurt, does not change. He who does not put out his money to usury, doesn't charge interest when he lends, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. So that's Psalm 15. You can read that there, Psalm 15, right in your Bibles. And those are 11 commandments, 11 kind of injunctions. Now, if we move to Isaiah, we can read these 6. Isaiah 33, and I'm reading from the New King James, if it sounds a little bit different than your translation, the King James. It says 6, there's 6 things. He who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he who despises the gain of oppressions, he who gestures with his hands, refusing bribes, and he who stops his ears from the hearing of bloodshed and shuts his eyes from evil. So there are 6 things there. 6 things that are mentioned. In Micah, we come down to 3. I think you know this verse pretty well. To love mercy, do justly, and walk humbly with your God. Those are the 3 commandments. To love mercy, to do justly, and to walk humbly with your God. The first part of that's kind of interesting, that we have this, you love mercy. It's like that's an amazing transformation here. In the first couple of places, it's doing righteousness and all that, and walking righteousness. But now it's talking about loving mercy. And what is mercy about? What is mercy about? Anyone? Sorry. Did you give mercy to anyone today? Did you let someone who made like a stupid move on the highway and they're stuck in the turn-only lane and their blinker is on, and you let them in? Congratulations, you loved mercy at that moment, because they didn't deserve to come over there because they violated the law, but you loved mercy and let them into your space there, even though you were probably late for work and a meeting that you had to be at. But you did love mercy. But these things are starting to flip around a little bit. You love mercy. He has shown you what to do. Oh, actually, sorry. And he says, to require of you to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. To do justly and to love mercy are connected. So, to do justly is to love mercy, and then to walk humbly with your God. Now, Isaiah 56 says this. But the idea of mercy entering the picture, Isaiah 56, keep justice and do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come, and my righteousness is to be revealed. Then Amos 5:4. Amos 5:4 says, seek me and live. That's, so do justly, love mercy, seek me and live. This is the one answer. And then the last one is, the just shall live by faith. This is entering into his rest. For God cannot be found in the fulfillment of the law. Now, Jesus reduced this in Matthew 22. He goes to Leviticus 19:18, and he says this. He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. These 2 things. You get these things right, and everything will be fine. And that's what God was saying with his instructions to Israel. He said, you are a nation now delivered. You have been caught out of something that was enslaving you. You have been caught out of the oppression of a system of paganism that none of those gods were ever satisfied. Even during the plagues, the Egyptians are still trying to satisfy these gods, even though they hate them at this point. When you have piles of frogs piling up everywhere, which is kind of interesting because it's like they went right at the primary thing of humanity when they did first there was the blood, the water, and then the frogs, right? Remember the frogs? What was that like? The frogs piling up. But what was the frog? The frog was a fertility god. All right? The frog was a fertility god. Well, why is a frog a fertility god? Anyone know? You ever been to a pond and seen hundreds of tadpole eggs? That's why the god of the frog is the fertility god. So none of those gods mean anything, but if you have me at the center, then you'll love your neighbor as yourself, and you'll go from number 1 will carry you all the way through to number 10. That's the thing. Having number 1 will help you keep all of it. Because if you love your neighbor as yourself, then you're not going to steal, covet, adulterate, all of those things. None of those things are going to happen. But the first thing is loving the Lord your God. This idea of being in love with the God of heaven and responding to his initiation to you is the big thing for Israel. And now God is going to give Israel something. Okay, here comes the stones, and now God is going to give. You got the stones, you got the rules, and now God is going to show the place of his presence. 50 chapters in the Bible deal with the tabernacle. Okay, now this is going to be like a big, what is it? It's a big tent. Not even a really big tent. It's like a small tent. It's like when you look at it, you're going to say, that's it? That's it? There is like up in Up in Lancaster, you can go and you could see an actual replica of the tabernacle. You can go in, and I've been there. It's actually very powerful if you're a spiritual person. You go in there if you're spiritual on that day. I'm not going to say that, if you're filled with the Spirit that day, you'll be very affected by what's happening there, and you'll sense the imagery. We're going to go through this in a second. The imagery that God's giving there. This is presence. Okay, not just, Not just rules, not just regulations, but presence. I understand. There's something about me being with you. There's something about sensing me being there that's going to make things profitable, make things fulfill you. There's a fulfillment that you're looking for. And I think you're going to see something here, I think, tonight that's interesting about this. All right? Okay. So where are we? Okay. All right. So God is going to give this to Israel to show His presence because He wants this. Okay, He delivers these instructions, these commandments, these guides for living to this people because He's going to also bring His presence into this group of people. And this privilege, this selection, this election of them is for the world. This is for the mission. There's a top line and a bottom line. The top line that's there is God has chosen you. The bottom line is that God has chosen you to communicate and bless the whole world. It's not just that I have chosen you. The top line is totally related to the bottom line. The top line is, yes, this is true about who you are. I did see you, I did hear you, I did rescue you, I did redeem you, and now I have communicated something to you. And now I'm going to demonstrate my presence in you. Why? Because this standard of righteousness is something that all the nations should be embracing. And God says that He is the Lord of all the earth and He will do right. Shall not the Lord of all the earth do right? This is what Abraham said in Genesis 18 when there's a conversation between, are you going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and the righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah? And Abraham appeals to God. This is the relationship. And this is the thing that God is trying to teach us throughout the Bible, is that the relationship to my person is the key to life. The relationship to me is the key to life. I am. I am. Isn't there a song, You Are, I Am? That's like there's a song on the radio right now that says that. You are, I am. And He is the I am, and He's asking for a relationship with us and through Israel first. And Abraham had this relationship. Won't the God of all the earth do right? And this is the communication that God is saying. If you live in the commandments, if you live and enjoy my presence, then the whole earth is going to recognize that worshiping me is right. Numbers 27:16 says that the Lord is the Lord of the spirits of all flesh. All flesh. Not just some flesh, all flesh. God is the Lord of the spirits of all flesh. And so He gives the 10 Commandments. The Lord brought the people out. He gives this and He goes through this, this instruction to them. And he wants them to do this and live so that the world will see that when you do this, they can live too. So Egypt was just a small part of the whole cosmic system that God was trying to fix by calling a nation and giving them His commands and then encouraging the enjoyment of His presence. That's the whole thing, the enjoyment of His presence. All right, so 50 chapters throughout the Bible deal with this thing called the tabernacle. It begins in Exodus 29:42. Exodus 29:42. I think that's wrong, actually. I think I have that wrong. Because this says, there shall be a continual burnt offering throughout your generations. And I got a wrong reference up there. Sorry about that. The instruction begins in, the instruction for Moses, the instruction to Moses about what to begins in Exodus 25:9 and continues through this and continues through these chapters all the way through to chapter 31. This idea of the tabernacle, 25 through 31, God will give the instructions on how this is supposed to be built. So 50 chapters, 13 chapters in Exodus, 13 in Numbers. You can see the numbers there. Leviticus, 18 chapters dealing with the administration of that. A couple chapters in Deuteronomy. And then in the New Testament, we have Hebrews 4, a chapter, 4 chapters in Hebrews, 4 chapter in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament that deal with specifically with the tabernacle. So there we see this is about how big the compound was. And that place that the glow is on is the Holy of Holies. That is the holiest place in the whole camp of Israel. And this section is going to be constructed entirely for the purpose of sacrifice and offering and fellowship. And the priests are going to administrate this. And it's going to be the center of Israel's encampment. It's going to be right at the center. And the holiest of holies is in the middle of this tent. So the tabernacle is a temporary place, a temporary dwelling place. And this has some pictures, some applications to our lives. 1 Corinthians, know ye not that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you. So the direction for the tabernacle comes from God to Moses, and this is going to be a place. It's going to be a figure for them. And that's, you can see, shows it even more basic. It's not as elaborate, not as ornate, it's not as demonstrative as the kinds of things that the pagans were doing in Egypt. Not large pyramids, not large statues. The Sphinx, like massive kind of structure. Israel probably had a hand in making the clay and the bricks that started that structure in their bondage in Egypt. But God is giving them a different kind of thing. It's simple. It's simple, but also precious to them. And so, know ye not that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit dwells in you. So the physical demonstration of this temple, of this tabernacle, is for the people, is for this category. Israel is going to see, is going to be able to see the presence of God. They're going to be able to feel and sense the presence of God. And this is an important element. These are the rules, and these are the rules, and there's the rules, and then there's the reality, I think we could say it is. There's the rules, and then there's a reality. How do we know you're real? And God is saying, this is how you're going to know I'm real. Build this and watch what happens. God gives Moses all these instructions. He builds this, and then the presence of God comes down in a cloud and fills the place, and not even Moses can go in to this place at that point. So the rules are important to govern your heart and your external life, but the reality of who I am, the rules aren't possible. It's not possible to follow the rules unless you find a way to understand who I am and to relate to me. And so I'm going to give you a demonstration. And so all of these things speak of a way to God, of coming to a place of enjoying Him and enjoying that relationship with Him. Okay, tabernacle. So Christ is in all of this typology. This is a theological word, typology. These are pictures or symbols that God uses to make a point about spiritual things. And so in this tabernacle, Christ is in all of this. There is one door. You go back 2 places. You see there's one door. You can see it right there. There's one door. Is that working? There's one door right there, and you come in through it and go into this place to worship. You can't go into this holy of holy place. Only one person's allowed in there. But here's the one door right out there. So only one door. Jesus, I am the door. He said this, John 10:9. The tabernacle that Moses, the pattern that Moses receives points to Christ as being the only way into a real right relationship with God. The next part is the Christ in the tabernacle is the brazen altar, this substitution that's necessary to atone for the sins. I give my life as a ransom for many. Okay, when we get to the part in Leviticus, we're going to see what this means. Okay, now, here is, see, is it working? Come on. Okay. This is the lattice work, and this is the outer part. Now, there was an instruction that God gave to Israel that they are not to construct, they are not to use their own tools to build some sort of altar. Okay, this is the brazen altar, but the sacrifices will rest on stones that are piled up on the inside, and then this lattice work, when you burn the offering inside of that, the smoke has a way to go, and the fire has a sort of like this is the first Weber grill, okay? It's kind of, you let the air in to keep the fire going to burn the sacrifice. I know that was kind of profane, but anyway, this is how it works. It's like you see this grating work, and then this shelf on the outside. The sacrifices would be tied to these horns. They would be slain. And then the fire that was resting on the earth and the stones that was inside of it. So the altar itself was not constructed, it was constructed hollow. This thing was constructed hollow so that it didn't violate the scriptures, which said you're not supposed to construct or fashion your own kind of altar with your own tools. You can pick up stones and build a place to burn the offering, but don't put any tool on them. And you can surround it like this to sort of concentrate the fire. This is a very functional kind of sacrificial altar. But inside that altar, it's hollow. And that's where the sacrifice went in, and that was part of it there. The brazen altar, so this is where the sacrifices were made. Brass in the Bible always speaks of judgment. Brass speaks of judgment. Then the next part here is Christ in the tabernacle. This is the laver, the brass laver needed for God's purification, needed to enjoy God's presence. If I do not wash you, you have no part in me. This is what Jesus said to the apostles as he washed their feet. You're going to come in, and the sacrifice is made, but the way that you live in the world, you're going to come with some stuff on you, and you're going to. This is the we are believers in Jesus Christ. The sacrifice is once and for all, but our lives are not perfect lives, and that's what this speaks to. It's kind of amazing. The laver was made out of the mirrors of women in Israel. They send out a call and said, okay, ladies, surrender all of your looking glasses. We're going to make something about washing for sin with all of your mirrors. So that's the way it was made. All of the brass looking glasses were collected, and they fashioned this pool where the priest would wash after sacrificing. So it's a picture of needing to wash again. So our lives need the washing of the water of the Word because we're not perfect. We need to confess. We need to confess even though there has been a sacrifice for our life. All right, the next one is the lamp. John 8:12, I'm the light of the world. The illumination needed to do God's work. So this speaks of Jesus as the light of the world. And so having Christ and the oil of the Holy Spirit, this lamp is fueled by olive oil, pressed and crushed, speaking of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit and the wick stands in it, had to be trimmed. It was supposed to be lighted at all times. This lighted at all times. So, someone calling me? Well, have to wait. Okay. The next one is the bread of the presence. There's a table of showbread it's called. And this is in John 6:48. I am the bread of light. There needs to be sustenance. This bread is baked, set out before the Lord, and then the next day the priests eat it. So it's a holy bread before the Lord, and it's presented to Him, and then the priests are allowed to eat this after the next day. It's over. Day-old bread. That's, the day-old bread was the food for the priests. It sat in the presence of God for a day, and then they could eat it after that. But Jesus, I am the bread of life, the sustenance that happened there, in there. You okay? A couple more, and then we'll take a break here. Christ in the tabernacle. This is the incense, intercession that's needed for God's people. John 17:9. I am praying for them. Incense in the Bible is a type of we see this in Revelation. The incense coming before the throne of God indicates the prayers of the saints. And so Jesus is interceding for us always and forever. So Jesus is interceding for us, and He is, presenting hearing our prayers and interceding for us. So this piece of furniture in the tabernacle speaks of the presence of God to pray and the presence of God in our lives to pray. Okay, we're going to go to the veil and the mercy seat after our break because it's a little involved. So let's take a break. It's 7:05. You can take a break till 7:15, and we'll start talking about that, the veil and the Holy of Holies. Okay? You all right? Okay. All right.